The thing about family dinners at my parents' house is that they follow a script. Dad sits at the head of the table in the chair he's occupied for 30 years. Mom brings out the roast or the chicken or whatever she spent all afternoon preparing. My older brother Kevin talks about his sales numbers. My younger sister Michelle shows photos of her kids. And I sit quietly eating my food, being the family disappointment. "How's the apartment search going?" Mom asked, passing the mashed potatoes. "Still looking," I said. Which was true in a sense. I was always looking at real estate. Just not apartments for myself. Dad cut into his steak with more force than necessary. "At 34 you should own something by now. Kevin bought his first house at 28. Kevin nodded from across the table. "Market was better then, but still. You've got to build equity, Sarah. Renting is throwing money away." "I'm aware," I said mildly. "Are you?" Dad set down his knife and fork, giving me his full attention. The attention that used to make me nervous when I was younger, desperate for his approval. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've been working at that property management company for what, 8 years? And you've got nothing to show for it." 7 years, actually. 7, 8, what's the difference? Point is, you're spinning your wheels. Living in that tiny apartment, driving a 10-year-old Camry. Stop pretending to be successful when you're clearly not. Uncle Frank, Dad's younger brother, raised his wine glass in agreement. "Your father's right. At your age you should have assets. Property. Investments. You'll never own anything at the rate you're going." I kept eating my dinner, cutting my steak into precise pieces. "You're probably right." Michelle jumped in, trying to help in her well-meaning way. "Sarah works really hard, Dad. Property management is a real job." I didn't say it wasn't a real job. I said it's not getting her anywhere. Dad leaned back in his chair. "You know what your problem is? You're too passive. Too willing to just accept whatever comes your way instead of fighting for more." Mom placed her hand on Dad's arm. "Richard, maybe we could talk about something else." "No, Barbara. She needs to hear this. All her life, Sarah's been content to just exist. No ambition. No drive. Look at Kevin, he's a regional sales director. Michelle married well, has a beautiful family. And Sarah's still in that cramped apartment complex doing admin work." The property management company where I worked was called Sterling Properties. I'd started there 7 years ago as an assistant property manager, learning the business from the ground up. Rent collection, maintenance requests, tenant relations, lease agreements. The unglamorous work of keeping buildings running and people housed. What Dad didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 3 years into that job I'd started buying properties myself. Small ones at first. A duplex that needed work. A 4-unit building in a transitioning neighborhood. I'd learned to spot potential, to run the numbers, to manage contractors and renovations and tenant relationships. What they really didn't know was that I'd bought Dad's house 5 years ago when he was facing foreclosure after a bad business investment. Bought it through an LLC, hired a management company to handle the ownership details, and let him think he'd worked out a special arrangement with the bank. The property taxes, the insurance, the major repairs, all of it flowed through my accounts while Dad thought he was making his mortgage payments to some faceless lending institution. "I'm doing okay," I said quietly. "Okay isn't good enough." Dad's voice rose. "You're 34 years old. When I was your age, I owned this house, had 2 kids, and was building a business. What do you have?" I looked at him across the table. At the house that was legally mine, that I'd saved when his construction business hit hard times. At the property tax bills I paid every November, the homeowner's insurance I renewed every spring, the new roof I'd approved last year when he thought the bank was covering it. "Not much," I said. "You're right about that." Kevin shook his head. "Sarah, you've got to want more for yourself. That's all Dad's saying. Have some ambition." "Kevin's mortgage is $2,800 a month," Dad said proudly. "That's $33,600 a year in equity he's building. What are you paying in rent? $1,200? That's $14,400 a year you'll never see again." Actually, my rent was $950 for a perfectly nice 1-bedroom apartment that required 0 maintenance from me. And the 18 properties I owned across 3 counties generated about $47,000 a month in gross rental income, minus expenses. But who was counting? "You make a good point," I said. Uncle Frank leaned forward. "You need to get aggressive, Sarah. Real estate is wealth building. I've got 3 rental properties myself. Bought them over the years, built up equity. That's how you create financial security. 3 properties. I'd closed on my 19th 2 weeks ago. A 6-unit building near the university that would generate strong rental income from student housing. That's impressive, Uncle Frank, I said sincerely. Because it was impressive. 3 rental properties was more than most people ever accumulated. It's not rocket science, he continued. You just have to stop being afraid of debt. Leverage is your friend. Take out a loan, buy a property, rent it out. The tenants pay your mortgage. I'll think about it, I said. Dad sighed heavily. That's what you always say. I'll think about it. Meanwhile, time's passing. You're getting older. At some point you've got to stop thinking and start doing. Mom cleared her throat. Who wants dessert? I made apple pie. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Kevin's latest sales trip, Michelle's youngest starting kindergarten, Uncle Frank's upcoming vacation. I helped Mom clear the dishes, accepted my slice of pie, and continued playing my role as the family underachiever. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my property manager at Sterling Properties, where I still worked full-time because I actually enjoyed the work. Tenant in Unit 4B says kitchen sink is leaking. Should I call the plumber? I texted back, yes, use Jerry. He's familiar with that building. Sarah, put the phone away at dinner, Dad said without looking at me. Sorry. I slipped it back in my pocket. After dessert, I helped Mom load the dishwasher while the men watched a football game in the living room. Don't take it personally, Mom said quietly. Your father just wants the best for you. I know. He worries. We both do. You're so quiet about your life, we never know what's really going on with you. I handed her another plate. I'm fine, Mom. Really? Are you dating anyone? Not at the moment. You should try those dating apps. Michelle met several nice men before she met Tom. I'll consider it. She patted my arm. You're a good girl, Sarah. I just wish you'd fight for yourself a little more. Let people see what you're capable of. If only she knew. Monday morning, I was at my desk at Sterling Properties when my phone rang. Dad's accountant, Gerald Morrison. Miss Chin? This is Gerald Morrison. I handle your father's accounts. I know who you are, Gerald. What can I do for you? I'm reviewing your father's tax documents for the year, and I've noticed something unusual. The property tax payments on the house, they're not coming from his bank account. My stomach tightened. Okay. They're coming from an LLC. Meridian Property Holdings. I've been trying to track down the payment source because the records your father has don't match what I'm seeing from the county assessor's office. I see. Miss Chin, do you know anything about this? Your father seems to think he's been making these payments through his mortgage servicer, but that's not what the records show. They show direct payments from Meridian Property Holdings, which according to state business records, is registered to you. I closed my office door. Yes. That's my company. Your company has been paying your father's property taxes? For the last 5 years, yes. Silence on the other end. Then, Miss Chin, forgive me for being direct, but why? Because 5 years ago Dad was facing foreclosure. His business had taken some hits, he'd missed several payments, and the bank was starting proceedings. He didn't tell anyone because he was embarrassed. I found out through a friend who works in county records. And you? I bought the house. Paid off the mortgage, transferred the deed to my LLC. I hired a management company to handle the owner communications so Dad would think he was dealing with a bank or servicer. He makes his payments to the management account, which covers about 60% of the actual costs. I cover the rest: property taxes, insurance, major repairs. More silence. Does he know? No. Miss Chin, I have to disclose this to my client. This is his tax return we're discussing, and there are significant implications if he doesn't own the property he thinks he owns. I understand. Do what you need to do. For what it's worth, Gerald said, his voice softer, that was an extraordinarily generous thing you did. He's my father. He needed help. Still, most children couldn't, do something like that. After we hung up, I stared at my computer screen without really seeing it. 5 years of careful management, of quiet help, of letting Dad maintain his dignity while I kept the house he loved from being sold at auction. All about to be revealed because of tax season. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Need to talk. Come by the house tonight. I drove to the house that evening. The house I legally owned, though it hadn't felt like mine in any real sense. Dad answered the door with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly. Something more complicated. Living room, he said. Mom was already there, sitting on the couch with a tissue in her hand. Uncle Frank was there too, standing by the fireplace. Kevin and Michelle hadn't been summoned to this particular family meeting. Gerald called me today, Dad said without preamble. Told me something very interesting about the property taxes on this house. I sat down in the chair across from the couch. Okay. He says you've been paying them. That you've been paying them because you own this house. My house. Technically, yes. Technically. Dad's voice rose. What the hell does that mean technically? It means legally the house is owned by my LLC. Meridian Property Holdings. You've been making payments to a management account that I set up. Those payments cover about 60% of the actual costs. I cover the difference. Mom pressed the tissue to her mouth. Uncle Frank stared at me like I'd announced I was an alien. 5 years, Dad said. Gerald says this has been going on for 5 years. Yes. Why? Because you were facing foreclosure. Because the bank was going to take the house you and Mom have lived in for 30 years. Because you needed help and were too proud to ask for it. Dad sat down heavily. I was working it out with the bank. I had a plan. You were 3 months from foreclosure proceedings. I checked. There was no plan that was going to save the house in time. So you just bought it? Without telling me? Yes. With what money? Uncle Frank interjected. Sarah, where did you get the money to buy a house? This house was worth $380,000 5 years ago. I looked at him steadily. I had it. From where? From the real estate portfolio I've been building for 9 years. I started with a duplex I bought with money I'd saved from working double shifts at Sterling. Fixed it up, rented it out, used the income and equity to buy another property. Then another. I've got 19 properties now across 3 counties. The portfolio is worth about $8.4 million. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen. 8. Mom couldn't finish the sentence. Million. Give or take depending on current market valuations. The properties generate about $47,000 a month in gross rental income. After expenses, mortgages, taxes, insurance, maintenance, property management fees, I clear about $22,000 a month in profit. Dad's face had gone pale. You're a millionaire. Several times over, yes. But you work at a property management company. You drive a 10-year-old Camry. You live in a $950 apartment that requires zero maintenance from me and lets me focus my capital on income-generating properties instead of personal real estate. I kept my voice calm. I work at Sterling because I enjoy it and because it keeps me connected to the industry. The Camry runs perfectly well. I don't need a fancy car to prove anything. Uncle Frank sat down on the arm of the couch. 19 properties. 19. Most are small multifamily buildings. 4 to 8 units. One is a 12-unit apartment complex I bought at auction 3 years ago and renovated. That one alone generates $14,000 a month. Jesus Christ, Dad whispered. Mom was crying now, actually crying. Sarah, why didn't you tell us? I tried to. Multiple times over the years. But every time I mention real estate investing or property ownership, someone would change the subject or suggest I was getting ahead of myself. Eventually I stopped trying. But at dinner just last night, Dad stopped, his face flushing. I told you that you'd never own anything. You did. And you just sat there. You let me lecture you about building equity and wealth creation when you're... He couldn't finish. When I've been quietly doing exactly what you said people should do. Yes. Uncle Frank shook his head slowly. 3 properties. I've been proud of owning 3 rental properties. And you're sitting there with 19. Your 3 properties are impressive, Uncle Frank. You built them over time carefully, which is the right way to do it. I just had more time and got lucky with some of the purchases. Don't do that, Dad said sharply. Don't downplay what you've done. $8 million isn't luck. No, I agreed. It's 9 years of 18-hour days. It's learning to read market trends and spot undervalued properties. It's developing relationships with contractors and learning to manage renovations under budget. It's tenant management and legal compliance and financial modeling and risk assessment. It's a lot of things, but luck is only a small part of it. Mom wiped her eyes. The house. You saved the house. I saved your house. Dad's house. The house where I grew up. Yes. Why? Dad's voice cracked. Why would you do that without telling me? Because you needed help and wouldn't have accepted it if you'd known it was coming from me. Because you were ashamed of the business problems and didn't want anyone to know. Because I had the ability to help and it seemed like the right thing to do. But you let me think. He stopped, swallowed hard. I've been making those payments every month. Thinking I was paying a mortgage, maintaining my house, being responsible. And it wasn't all fake, Dad. You were being responsible. Those payments you make cover most of the operating costs. The property taxes and insurance I handle separately, yes, but you're not living here for free. You're contributing significantly to the household expenses. 60%, Gerald said. About that, yes. The taxes alone are $8,200 a year. Insurance is another $2,400. Your payments don't quite cover everything, but they cover a lot. Uncle Frank stood up suddenly. I need a drink. Richard, you want a drink? Yeah, Dad said. Yeah, I do. They went to the kitchen, leaving me alone with Mom. Sarah, she said softly. When you said you were looking at apartments, what did you actually mean? I was looking at a 12-unit building in Riverside. Needs some work, but the location is good and I think I can get it for under market value. I made an offer last week. So you're not looking for a place to live? No. I'm happy where I am. Low overhead means more capital for investment. She laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Your father told you that you'd never own anything. And you own our house. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Don't apologize. Don't you dare apologize for being generous and discreet and everything we raised you to be. I wish I'd known. I wish I'd seen it. I tried to tell you, Mom. Remember 2 years ago at Thanksgiving? I mentioned I was thinking about expanding into commercial properties. You said that sounded nice and asked if I'd tried online dating. She covered her face with her hands. Oh God. I remember that. I thought you meant you were thinking about maybe buying a small rental house someday. I meant I was considering purchasing a 6,000 square foot commercial building to convert into office spaces. Did you buy it? Yes. It's fully leased now. 3 businesses, generating $8,500 a month. Dad and Uncle Frank returned with whiskey glasses. Dad handed one to Mom, who took it without protest. I don't understand, Dad said, sitting down across from me again. How did we not see this? How did we miss that you were building an empire while we thought you were struggling? Because I didn't need you to see it. I just needed to build it. But why? Why let us think you were? He gestured helplessly. Unsuccessful. Directionless. A disappointment. I met his eyes. Because correcting you every time you made assumptions was exhausting. Because I got tired of trying to make you understand. Because at some point, I realized my success didn't require your validation. The words hung in the air between us. Uncle Frank broke the silence. That's fair. Brutal but fair. I'm not trying to be brutal. I'm trying to be honest. You asked why I didn't tell you. I'm telling you. I tried. You didn't hear me. Eventually I stopped trying. Mom set down her whiskey glass with a sharp click. And the house. When were you planning to tell us about the house? Honestly, I wasn't. I was going to keep paying the taxes and insurance and let you live here as long as you wanted. When you eventually passed away, I'd have quietly transferred it to Kevin or Michelle. Nobody needed to know. That's insane, Kevin's voice came from the doorway. Michelle stood behind him. Apparently word had spread and they'd come over. Is it? I turned to look at them. What would have been better? Telling Dad I'd bought his house out from under him? Making him feel like he'd failed so completely that his daughter had to rescue him? That seemed crueler than just handling it quietly. She's got a point, Michelle said softly. Kevin came into the room followed by Michelle. Sarah, this is crazy. You're a property manager. How do you own 19 buildings? 20. I closed on number 20 last week. 6-unit building near the university. 20 properties. Jesus. Kevin sat down on the floor, apparently unable to process this information, standing up. And you work at Sterling, why? Because I like it. Because property management was how I learned the business. Because keeping that job means I stay grounded in the actual work of maintaining properties rather than just collecting rent checks from a distance. Dad was staring into his whiskey glass. 5 years. You've been saving my house for 5 years and letting me lecture you about building equity and financial responsibility. You weren't wrong about the principles, Dad. Building equity is important. Owning property creates wealth. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything, he said bitterly. You figured it out on your own while I was too busy being disappointed in you to see what you'd actually accomplished. That's not entirely true. You taught me to spot good value. Remember taking me to estate sales when I was a kid? You'd evaluate properties, point out what needed fixing, what had potential. I learned that from you. Estate sales, he repeated. You learned real estate investing from me taking you to garage sales. I learned to see potential. To understand that something's current condition doesn't define its future value. That's the foundation of everything I've built. Michelle was crying now too. Apparently it was a family trait. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I thought you were just, I don't know, content with not having much. And the whole time you've been running a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. Yeah. I looked around at my family, at all these people who'd known me my whole life without really seeing me. Look, I know this is a lot to process. And I know you all feel bad about the assumptions you made. But I don't need apologies. I need you to understand that I'm okay. I've always been okay. I didn't need saving or fixing or lectures about ambition. I just needed to be left alone to build what I was building. But we could have helped, Mom said. If we'd known. You couldn't have helped. Not really. This wasn't about money or connections. It was about learning a business from the ground up, making mistakes, figuring things out. The help I needed was the kind I had to find myself. Uncle Frank raised his glass. To Sarah, who apparently has more balls than all of us combined. Frank, Mom said reprovingly, but she was smiling slightly. What? It's true. She bought her father's house without telling him to save his pride. That takes guts. Dad finally looked up from his whiskey. What happens now? What do you mean? With the house. It's yours. Legally yours. What are you planning to do with it? Nothing. You live here, you keep making your payments, everything continues exactly as it has been. The only thing that changes is now you know the truth. But you own it. On paper, yes. But it's your home. That doesn't change. Sarah, we can't just live in your house without. Why not? You're already doing it. You have been for 5 years. Nothing has to change unless you want it to. Mom shook her head. Everything's changed. We thought we knew you and we didn't know you at all. You knew me. You just didn't know what I did for a living. There's a difference. Is there? Dad set down his glass. Because I'm sitting here realizing that I told my millionaire daughter that she'd never amount to anything. I lectured her about ambition while she was quietly saving my house. I don't know how to. His voice broke. I don't know how to come back from that. You don't need to come back from anything, Dad. You were wrong about my circumstances, but you weren't wrong about the principles. Property ownership is important. Building equity matters. Financial security is worth pursuing. You taught me that. I just applied it differently than you expected. I called you passive, he said. Last night at dinner I said you were too passive, too willing to accept whatever came your way. I remember. And the whole time you've been one of the most aggressive real estate investors I've never heard of. I smiled slightly. I prefer strategic to aggressive, but yeah, essentially. Kevin was scrolling through his phone. I just Googled Meridian Property Holdings. There's a business listing. It says, Commercial and Residential Property Management and Investment. That's your company. That's one of my companies. I have 3 LLCs for different purposes. Keeps the liability separate. 3 companies, he repeated. You have 3 companies. And she still drives a Camry, Uncle Frank said, shaking his head. Unbelievable. The Camry runs great. Why would I replace it? Because you can afford to. Dad said, gesturing wildly. Sarah, you're worth $8 million. You could drive a Mercedes. You could live in a mansion. You could. I could, I agreed. But I don't want to. I like my life the way it is. Simple. Efficient. Focused on work I find meaningful rather than consumption I don't need. Michelle spoke up from the doorway. What do you need? What? You said consumption you don't need. What do you actually need? What makes you happy? I thought about it. Seeing a property I've renovated come back to life. Helping tenants find affordable, well-maintained housing. Solving the puzzle of how to make a building profitable while keeping rents reasonable. That makes me happy. Not things, Michelle said. Work makes you happy. Good work makes me happy. Work that matters makes me happy. Dad stood up suddenly. I need to apologize. Properly. Not just for last night but for every time I suggested you weren't doing enough, weren't being enough, weren't enough. Sarah, I'm sorry. Dad. No, let me finish. I'm your father. I should have seen you. I should have asked questions and actually listened to the answers. I should have trusted that you knew what you were doing even when it didn't look like what I expected success to look like. He crossed the room and pulled me into a hug. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago but I'm saying it now. I'm so damn proud of you. I hugged him back, this complicated man who'd driven me crazy and motivated me in equal measure. Thanks, Dad. The house, he said, pulling back. We should talk about the house. About making this arrangement more official, more fair to you. It's already fair. You're contributing what you can. I'm covering the rest. It works. But your money is being used the way I want to use it. Dad, do you know what financial security means to me? It means knowing that the people I love have stable housing. That you and Mom can stay in the house where you raised us. That's worth more than any Mercedes or mansion. Mom was crying again but smiling through the tears. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between property 3 and property 4. Right around the time I realized that wealth isn't about what you own, it's about what you can do for the people and causes you care about. The next Sunday dinner was different. Dad didn't lecture me about ambition. Kevin asked actual questions about property management and real estate investing. Michelle wanted to know about the renovation process. Uncle Frank asked for advice about his 3 rental properties. Mom still made pot roast. We still sat around the same table. But the conversation had changed, opened up, become more honest. I looked at that building in Riverside, I said over dinner. The 12-unit. Going to pass on it. Foundation issues that would cost more to fix than the property's worth. Smart, Dad said. Always check the foundation. You taught me that. He smiled. Maybe I taught you more than I thought. You taught me plenty. You just didn't realize I was paying attention. After dinner, Dad and I did the dishes while everyone else watched football in the living room. He washed, I dried, the same division of labor we'd had since I was a kid. The property taxes are due next month, he said casually. For the house. I know. I've got it covered. Sarah, I'd like to pay them myself this year. The full amount. I looked at him. Dad, it's $8,200. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, but I want to. You've been covering them for 5 years. Let me do it this year. Okay, I said softly. If that's what you want. What I want is to contribute properly to the house I live in. What I want is to stop letting my daughter carry financial burdens I should be carrying. What I want is to be a better father than I've been. You've been a fine father. I've been a blind father. But I'm working on seeing better. He handed me another plate. Tell me about property 21. What are you looking at next? So I told him about the 8-unit building I was considering in East Side, about the market analysis I'd done, about the potential for renovation and improved rental income. He asked good questions, offered insights from his construction days, made suggestions about contractors who might do good work. We talked real estate and business and building wealth, father and daughter finally on the same page. Mom found us there an hour later, still at the sink, still talking, making up for years of conversations we should have had. You two going to stand there all night? Maybe, Dad said grinning. Your daughter's teaching me about capitalization rates. God help us all, Mom said, but she was smiling. I drove home that night to my $950 apartment in my 10-year-old Camry, past several properties I owned, past the life I'd built while everyone thought I was barely scraping by. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Thank you. For everything. But especially for the house. Love you. I texted back. Love you too. The thing about being underestimated is that it gives you room to work without pressure, to build without scrutiny, to become who you're meant to be without everyone watching and judging every move. But being seen, finally being seen for what you've actually accomplished, that has its own value. I parked in my assigned spot, climbed the stairs to my simple apartment, and pulled up the listing for property 21. 8 units, good bones, strong potential. I'd make an offer in the morning. As this was what I did. What I'd always done. What I'd keep doing regardless of whether anyone was watching or not. Building. Growing. Creating something that mattered. One property at a time.